try not to laugh.
With me today is Anna Lau. Anna is a outstanding and preeminent quality of life researcher who is going to share her wisdom with us today. Anna, can you tell us your current title and institutional affiliation?
Sure, I'm a research director at the Australian Centre on Quality of Life at Deakin University School of Psychology in Melbourne, Australia.
And prior to that?
I was actually at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University in Hong Kong for many years.
Very good, very good. Well, I was wondering, what do you see as your major contributions to the field of well-being?
Well, I'll have to say it's got to do with the cross-cultural investigation, cross-cultural understanding about the area. And I think the biggest thing for me and the most rewarding thing is to have created the International Wellbeing Group with Professor Robert Cummins.
Oh. And can you tell us about that group and its mission?
Sure. Well, essentially we wanted this group to be a really inclusive group because we feel that nowadays in many institutions, you know, how the way it's become just really, really bureaucratic, that we feel that sometimes researchers of different backgrounds, of different disciplines, don't really get to have the opportunity or, you know, to have a fair chance to be able to kind of, you know, join the boat, let's get on it, create network for them, some kind of a platform where they could come off as they wish, but to kind of within that build like bit of a foundation, be build a foundation for them, where they would feel like they're not alone, but there are other scholars just like them, all willing to share and to sort of facilitate one another in that mission. So the whole idea about that group, the way it's been created, is to really understand, to try and understand subjective well-being from a very cross-cultural perspective. So at the moment, really, we have lost count, more than 100 countries now involved, and everybody in a different role.
How wonderful.
Yeah. And I remember very clearly when it first started, 12, 13 years ago, Hong Kong was the very first. And I guess in some sense I find that really rewarding and I'm very, very proud of it as well.
Yes.
Because outside of Australia, Hong Kong was the very first to come in to represent that part of the world and China. And I feel really good about it because it was a very useful foundation and a bit of a springboard with Australia and Asia combined, which is quite different.
Yes.
It's a bit of a springboard for others to come and to be able to try and adopt and to build on the work that's been done.
Well, so it sounds like you're a real trailblazer, opening up China and Asia to quality of life studies and well-being. Is that correct?
Oh, well, I'm not sure whether I feel I'm a trailblazer, but...
Weren't you the very first to develop instruments?
Yes. It was developed in Australia, but then from there we moved into a much more cross-cultural context. Yes, with Hong Kong representing China. And,
well, it's an amazing achievement. And in this group with 100 countries, with some 200 countries in the world, that's half the countries of the world in your group.
I don't know how many countries there are in the world, but I know it's like quite a few.
It's about 100. It's about 193, but the people will count differently, and so it's around 200. So you really have had a tremendous impact.
Well, we didn't really plan it, and the whole idea of...
But you tried to make it congenial, and it seems like that's attracted people.
I guess so, yes. As with anything that's new, it's always a bit slow to begin with. But I'd say after about 5 years, we started to see things really mushrooming. And I guess it needed a bit of time to kind of take off because within that group, it's very much... based on the personal wellbeing index that's actually been created.
Yes.
So from there we've got all the different versions in different languages. But also it also comes with parallel versions, not just for the adult population, but also for children and people with cognitive impairment or intellectual disability.
Very good.
So it needed a bit of time to kind of, to kind of really set the foundation right. Yes.
Do you have professional meetings and journals and things that you publish?
Right. What we do is more like an e-forum. So when we have issues that we want to discuss, or because the idea of that particular index is very much driven by empirical findings that come out from, within the group. It's kind of like a loose, but it's a connected group as well. And we like to keep it that way to kind of cut down the whole bureaucracy side of it, but more a sharing, scholarly sort of platform.
Do you have a listserv?
No,
but you
don't.
email each other and have on a distribution list.
It's held at the center, the Australian Centre. And what happened is then we have the International Wellbeing Group Symposium that we normally run in conjunction with the International Society for Quality of Life Studies. So we've been doing that for a number of years now. So that's really where it's an opportunity where we get to have the people who are able to make it to come together to share where they're at in terms of the development of the index, but also the findings that are generated having used this index to advance understanding on the index. I mean, the index itself isn't just a mechanical thing, but it's very much also being built on a theory, which Professor Bob Cummins actually developed, which is the homeostasis theory, and the understanding of all that in terms of homeostatic protected mood, HP mood, so to speak. So it's kind of very much driven by that, and it's not just really an assembly of items because they look like they belong. So everything's being very rigorously tested and challenged against, with that theory as well.
Very well articulated theory, and it's research supported, and you're trying to continue the research base.
Yes, that's right.
Can you, looking to other research you've done, are there any other projects that you're particularly proud of in terms of your research career?
I say, well, there's a number of things that I feel very, very good about, and really it's been the whole development and the refinement and the translation of all the parallel versions. That took a lot of work and a lot of time.
And you were involved in this very intimately?
Yes. So when this first started, really for the first 3 to 4 years, that essentially outside of Australia, that was essentially what I was doing in Hong Kong, was just really pushing them out, and in a different language as well.
And how would you
them.
You found translators and
No, I'm quite fortunate because I'm pretty multilingual. I'm bilingual, more than bilingual, because I speak Cantonese but also Mandarin, and I also understand some dialects as well. But because of my English as well, with my background, so I'm able to have a very good understanding. But of course, I mean, I did involve, other, say, colleagues, for example, who may be bilingual. But we tend not very much to involve translators and stuff, because I feel that very often, sometimes when you involve them, you kind of lose the more functional, the kind of more cultural sort of context about it. Because I think very often when they start to come in, it becomes sort of kind of held back somewhat, because they tend to kind of stop at the semantic level. So it's kind of like the word for word translation. But it sort of misses out on we're checking out in terms of, say, the content validity. So the way in which I've done it is to check out the definition as well as we're doing the translation process at the same time. So how I managed this was sort of kind of brought in a research assistants or fellows, my students. So we work together like in a team. So we kind of get it out. We check out with them those items when they've been translated, whether it's actually coming up with the same idea when we back translate it back again.
So a translator has no idea of this well-articulated theory and how it's going to translate into the social context. So I guess I've read that there's over 1,000 dialects in China. Is that true? There's a lot of
Yeah.
So how many versions did you have to develop, or have you developed for the Chinese population thus far?
Well, I can't say that I claim all the credit. I mean, the real pioneer work was in Hong Kong. That was first when it first started, but it was in a Cantonese version. Then subsequently we were joined by other members as well, and one of the earliest was Singh, actually, Professor Singh, who is based in Shandong, and then he came up with the first Mandarin version, and then from there. Then I kind of also worked on looking at the Mandarin version in Singapore as well. So with my postgrad students, so we've got a version for that. Then Taiwan came into the picture as well. So there's been, other people involved and not just me.
Yes.
But all of that is actually written up in a recent article. Manuscript is on PWI in China, and that's actually going to be coming up soon in the encyclopedia. So that actually gives a very clear account about the whole development and the key people who've been involved. There's been a few key groups as well. Macau was one of them. And then we've got Shandong. Then we've got a group who's actually based at Monash University. And they did a lot of studies in different parts of China as well, Beijing and rural and so forth. Then we've got Dr. Dave Webb as well, professor actually now, Dave Webb. He was the second to join after Professor Singh. He actually looked at Tibet. So that was a really, really interesting, entry into all of that, because they kind of operate quite different. It looked like more the nomadic tribes. So they didn't use Chinese, so they had their own kind of language. But I don't think I've missed anyone out. I might get into trouble. But no, I think I've listed the key people with that, but they're all mentioned in this particular article.
And you said
there's one more I remember now. Gareth Davey, sorry.
Tell us about
actually, Dr. Gareth Davey also came on. I think was the third to join at the time. But he looked at Zhuhai city, which is not too far from Hong Kong. So it's interesting because we've got Macau, Zhuhai city, and Hong Kong, and there's actually sort of similarities, somewhat differences, but also similarities at the same time.
So are the PWIs, the personal well-being indexes, for those contiguous areas, are they different in any way in terms of the language, or are they pretty similar?
Well, the idea with the PWI is all the items must be kept the same, but it's much more to do with adapting it for the lingo in that particular part.
So does Macau have a different version?
More colloquial, sort of adapt it more to the local sort of language side of it that fits, so that people understand when they're being asked these questions.
Well, that's very important.
But there are tricky bits, like for example, say in mainland China, Professor Singh had difficulty trying to push, because we've got a domain now that's an optional, which is looking at how satisfied are you with your spirituality and religion. And that's a bit of a taboo, so he's got difficulty kind of pushing that through. But in Hong Kong, we're cool about that, we're fine. In Taiwan, I'm not quite sure. I think they're pretty okay about that too. Macau, they've tried it, but I think this is an area, this is a particular domain that needs to kind of be researched further, because it is quite complex.
Yes.
Coming in from the different countries and sort of cultural context.
Yes, and some religious traditions of Falun Gong or Christianity may not be as accepted or acceptable in China, correct?
Yeah.
Different parts. Are there any findings from your work in well-being that you think are especially practical or useful for the average person that you could share? Or?
There's two things. I think the most important thing that's a very cultural one is to do with response bias. And that's something that myself, I can't claim all the credit, but working with Bob as well. And also we've got another one of his postgrad students, PhD, who I helped partly supervise, Lufana, who's now based in Hong Kong as well. We've all kind of looked at response bias. And the whole idea is, very often when you're looking at comparing subjective well-being data, everybody treats it to be at the same level. So
Yes.
say a 7 in one study conducted in a Western country would be taken to mean the same as a 7, say that's done in an East Asian country, for example.
Yes, or Pacific Rim or anywhere.
So, but what we find is, in fact, it's not accurate because what East Asian or Southeast Asians tend to do as well is they tend to rate themselves. They tend not to rate themselves at the end of the continuum. So it's very much driven by confusion bias, you know, that kind of the religious belief.
Are they trying
very
to be
much
more
strongly Confucius.
And they're trying to be more self-effacing. They see it as bragging, maybe, to say they're too happy.
Yes.
Or,
Yeah, they tend to kind of look at life in a much more sort of a moderated way, and they don't think it's a good idea to really kind of go for the extremes, you know. And in some way, for some of the beliefs are sort of to do with fatalism as well. They think, oh, if you go to the, you know, really, really far, and some bad things might happen to you, or you shouldn't be too proud. So, you know, because bad things could happen to you. So it's the kind of the promotion, I guess, of the humility.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling extremely happy, to admit that could somehow bring a curse on you or some kind of bad thing. And it's also a form of, well, I think of the term bragging. You're somehow putting yourself above others. Is that correct?
It's to some
Or how
extent,
would you
yes.
put it?
There's actually quite
Help a Western Anglo understand this. 'Cause-
right. Essentially, it's really all about needing to live life, kind of viewing life and your experiences in moderation. More often, it's kind of like a positive and I suppose a negative. One is sort of more attached to the fear of fatalism, like, you know, if you go to the end, then bad things might come. It will kind of come back in a bad way, or you're saying that. I reached a real peak in my life. And so there's no more room for better things to happen, for example. Right. So, I mean, another perspective is more, I guess, to do with the whole culturation side, the way they socialize. It's just good. You know, to kind of be a bit more humble in a way. You approach life, people, your feelings. So I think that's where it's kind of infiltrated a little bit more, say, by, you know, the Taoism, you know, that kind of belief. So it's sort of a mixed bag. But from the research, what we tend to find the strongest really is very much influenced by the Confucianism. That's sort of biased. So
it's very interesting. And interesting how the concept of humility is perceived in different Western cultures versus Asian. And it's kind of an interesting concept. Are there other findings that you think that you'd like to share with us that have impressed you over the years, or you think might be important to share?
Yes. I say one of the most amazing thing, and this is where I guess the homeostasis theory comes in.
Yes.
Essentially, that is used. It's very much like a bit of a normative guide to determine whether there are groups or populations who are falling below the normative range. And what I absolutely am fascinated about by this area of research and with the index, and also continuously with the finding that's come out, is a very, very sensitive diagnostic indicator in that it's able to pick up groups, subgroups, populations who are needing attention or intervention, because very often they go missed. And what's interesting about this as well is it's in the way in which the questions are actually kind of constructed. They tend to kind of keep it a bit more neutral, but more sort of positively phrased rather than negative. So for example, instead of using, say, a depression scale, where it's more pathologically driven, you sort of ask, have you considered committing suicide or things like that? The thing about it we find is that, well, some people may not tell you that they've considered that, or that's how they really feel for whatever reasons, right? For faith or whatever. But with this particular format, this technique where you kind of flip the coin around and you ask them using more like a neutral, positively phrased kind of questions, they tend to kind of, I don't know what the trick is quite the right word, but they're more likely to be able to tell you what's happening with them. Because what happens...
So can you give me an example of a more positive item, that a less a stark or threatening item about depression or suicide?
Well, essentially, the Personal Wellbeing Index, they're made up of 8 items with the spirituality as the optional. Because with some people, when you ask them, they say, I don't have any, maybe they're not...
Correct. Some do not value that life domain, yes.
Yeah. I personally think everybody's got it. But whether you're conscious about it is another matter.
Yes.
But I think obviously it's important is what they think and whether they're conscious about it. Because if they're not, then you're asking something that they would know, have the vaguest what to answer.
Yeah.
So really, the most dominant are those 7. So it's looking like personal health, achieving in life, community connectedness, and so forth. So what happens is that with the items, what we do is an average. We add up all the ratings from 0 to 10, and then we work out an average, and that helps us to see when the total comes up if it actually falls below that normative range. So because in Western countries, they tend to be more sort of between like the 70 to sort of 80 range, around thereabouts. And with Asian populations, they tend to fall about 10 percentage points lower. So they tend to sit about 60 to 70. So if their rating comes out as falling below that particular normative range for that particular group, so the Western,
say in the 40s or 50s.
Then we know it's a sign.
Yes, and you haven't had to really ask them these stark questions.
Exactly.
Can you identify any particular groups that you've seen as a result of this wonderful, indirect and very sensitive way of noting if someone is very unhappy and can't get to their homeostatic point?
Right. They tend to be very much people, say for example, who say have a marriage breakdown.
Yes.
So something traumatic like that. Or some kind of really a strong health breakdown, for example. So those are the ones that tend to keep coming up as showing, hey, they're needing attention. But of course, everyone's different. I mean, some people, for whatever reason, maybe they're a bit more resilient with over time, with support or whatever, they're able to restore and come back again into that normative range. Not everybody necessarily, need to have like really sort of strong kind of interventions. But it tends to be more in that kind of group, really sort of serious health conditions, really sort of serious life crisis, like a divorce. It's sort of more those kind of groups.
And you're also saying, in terms of practical implications, that we could intervene with some of these groups that are scoring so low. Do you have ideas about how we could intervene in these crisis situations?
Well, it's really more about alerting what are the resources that can be considered. So obviously how people adapt and how they cope to try and work at coming back to the normative range again. I mean, essentially it falls into 2 categories. I mean, one is to do with more the internal kind of resources, working on, say, hope, optimism, like all of that kind of skill. Positive psychology, let's say. And then the others obviously more the external driven, the extrinsic type.
So, the circumstances of their
circumstances, maybe the physical environment, maybe they've got really, really huge financial problems. So it's just endless. I mean, the idea is to pick up whether they're in that vulnerable sort of a category, and then it's kind of alerting it to, say for example, if it's an organization who are looking at social welfare services, they'll be able to kind of pick this up and say, hey, we've got these people who are needing attention. So they will obviously look and see what can be done to bring in the intervention. So it's, or say if it's a health organization or a health system, for example, even public policy, it could be looking at identifying this below normative range groups and identifying if it's a social welfare kind of a concern, then obviously they can pour in or they kind of bring in the resources that are needed, social workers, psychologists, pumping in whatever that they feel could help that individual or that group.
Well, I see a possible practical implication here. Are you saying then that it might be good for social welfare workers or physicians or policymakers to use this measure? And
yes.
And have you okay?
It can be used at different levels. It can be from the very highest level, very broad, by the government. All the way down into practitioner level, right? So you've got obviously community organizations, health providers. Yeah. So it's, I guess from that point of view, it is very versatile, quite powerful in that sense, because it can be broad, or you can kind of work it down to a sort of more specific personal level that you have with your clients.
Can you think of any public policy implications of the work you've done so far with the PWI?
Yes, actually, I think a really good example is really in the case, say, with the Australian Unity Project, where they do the survey on a very regular basis, and they've been doing it now for over 10 years. I mean, it started off with Bob being involved with the organization. And from there, it's been very useful in terms of being able to identify the trends, but be able to kind of pick up, say, groups who are needing attention. So from that point of view, at a government level, they can actually consider inserting this as one of the standard indicators that they do, regularly on populations. Yeah.
Great. Well, it seems to be a very versatile measure and very fertile research program.
I think so. I say so. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like similar, I guess, to Canada as well. Because my understanding is also they've already, I think it's got to do with Alex, right? That it's actually become Alex MIQOLS. That's actually become considered now as one of the standard indicators. And I think it would be wonderful if I think more countries can kind of see the power is able to offer in being able to pick up groups or populations who are in need. And the beauty about this particular scale is short, and it's deliberately built to be broad. So because it's a diagnostic indicator, say if someone actually shows a particularly low rating in any of these domains, then whoever is conducting, whoever has an interest in the group that they're surveying, they could actually build what I call extra modules. So for example, if they're looking at, say, relationships and they're really low, then that could be a bit of an alerting point for the service providers to come in, and then if they want to know more, they can actually build additional items, but more as a module, as that accompanies the index.
Good. Well, do you have any ideas about how to keep this field growing and staying vibrant and making the well-being community of researchers flourish, if you will?
Visibility. I say visibility and the power of media. Because I think a lot of good work is being done by researchers, but how often do government people who are running big organizations, how informed are they? So I think this is where the idea of media and publicity, marketing, plays a very important role to get it out there. People make them understand what this is all about, how it can help, giving illustrative examples. Otherwise, I think very often what happens is that they get shelved. And so you lose that practical potential.
Yes.
And it just stays within the academic group, the researchers, the scholars, which I think is quite a bit of a shame.
Yes.
I think it'd be really good to be able to breach the academic research with, real life living situations, people, organizations, and so forth, and to be able to translate the science into practice. And I think that's the most powerful, and everybody wins out of that situation.
Yes. So we need to disseminate our findings and in a way that's understandable to the general public and to policymakers.
That's right.
It's very good. Do you have any other suggestions for keeping the field vibrant and growing?
Well, I suppose the bringing together really of researchers in the area, challenging each other's ideas. And I also feel it's very, very important to keep up with the publication and good publication about this kind of work, because I think at the end of the day, that's where the building of that credibility really comes in as well. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I thank you for your wonderful contribution to the field and for your time today.
You're most welcome, and thank you very much, Mike.